In the spring of 2025, a sealed tomb in Spain was quietly opened for the first time in more than a century. Inside, researchers expected to find dust, bones, the fragments of a life long gone. Instead, they uncovered something so astonishing that it stunned both the scientific team and the faithful who gathered to witness it. The body was there, not desiccated, not turned to dust, but strikingly whole. Skin clung from the hands and face. Strands of brown hair remained on the scalp. Even the outline of an eyelid, with its iris faintly visible, seemed to watch from across the centuries. 400 years had passed, yet this body had refused to surrender to decay. But there was more. Examination revealed a life of unrelenting suffering. Severe curvature of the spine, arthritic knees, calcaneal spurs in the feet that would have made every step agony, the near total loss of teeth, making eating and speaking painful. And yet, the bones of her right arm bore the unmistakable signs of strain, the wear of writer's hand that had worked tirelessly, even through pain. Whoever she was, this woman did not collapse under suffering. She kept walking, kept writing, kept working until her final breath. Her name was Teresa of Ávila. She lived in the 16th century in a Spain that was the most powerful nation on earth. Gold and silver poured in from the New World. The Spanish Empire stretched across oceans, and at its head stood King Philip II, ruler of a realm so vast that people said the sun never set on his dominions. But this was also a Spain on edge, caught in the storm of the Reformation. Martin Luther's challenge to Rome had split Europe in two. And Catholic monarchs, like Philip, saw themselves as defenders of the faith. His court became the beating heart of the Counter-Reformation, determined to renew the Catholic Church from within and to crush heresy from without. The tools of that defense were sharp. The Spanish Inquisition loomed over daily life, hunting out false beliefs and corruption and defending truth and the innocent. The Church itself, shaken by centuries of laxity and scandal, was being pushed toward reform. The Council of Trent, meeting between 1545 and 1563, sought to rebuild Catholic life with discipline, education, and a return to holiness. This was the world Teresa was born into, a world of grandeur and fear, of devotion and suspicion, of saints and sinners standing side by side. Spain was trying to purify itself to become the great Catholic champion, but it was also suffocating under its own weight. Bureaucracy, corruption, and a rigid system that left little room for voices that challenged the norm. And into this tension stepped Teresa, a woman, a mystic, a reformer. She would dare to speak in her own voice, to write in her own language, and to remake her order from the inside out. In a man's world, she became one of the loudest voices calling the Church back to holiness, and one of the most controversial. Now let's fast forward from 16th century Spain to modern-day Rome. The Eternal City is filled with churches, small ones tucked into corners, grand ones rising above piazzas. Each holds its own treasures, but there's one, Santa Maria della Vittoria, that hides a secret many tourists stumble upon without realizing they are standing before one of the most breathtaking works of art in history. The church itself is beautiful, Baroque in style, filled with light and gilded detail. Yet, what draws visitors is not the building, but the side chapel where an almost theatrical scene unfolds in marble. It was crafted by Gian Lorenzo Bernini, the genius of the Roman Baroque, a man who shaped the look of St. Peter's Square, whose fountains still sparkle in Roman piazzas, and whose sculptures seem to turn cold stone into living flesh. They called him the Shakespeare of sculpture because, like the playwright, he captured every nuance of human passion and drama. Bernini was a child prodigy, rivaling the masters before he was even 10 years old. And by the mid-1600s, he was the most sought-after artist in Europe. His work wasn't just sculpture, it was theater carved in stone. And then came his masterpiece, In this small Roman church, Bernini set marble figures beneath a hidden window so that real sunlight poured down as golden rays, illuminating the scene. In balconies on either side, carved onlookers, members of the Cornaro family, lean forward as if watching a performance. The entire chapel becomes a stage, and at the center of it lies a single moment. One woman, one angel, one fiery vision. The name of the sculpture? The Ecstasy of St. Teresa. Teresa herself described the moment. She was in prayer when suddenly she became aware of an angel beside her, holding a long golden spear tipped with fire. With it, he pierced her heart several times. She wrote that the pain was so sharp she cried out, yet at the same time it was accompanied by an indescribable sweetness. She says her soul was utterly consumed with the great love of God, and that she longed never to be free of that wound. This is what came to be known as the transverberation of St. Teresa, a mystical union of pain and joy, suffering and ecstasy, the human and the divine colliding in a single, overwhelming instant. Decades later, Bernini captured that very moment in marble. He shows Teresa, her body collapsing back, her face overcome in a rapture that seems to mingle agony and bliss. Above her, the angel leans forward, delicate and almost smiling, holding the fiery spear poised to strike. Rays of gold cascade down from the hidden window, making the scene glow with heavenly light. But this was no ordinary sculpture. It was bold, daring, even scandalous for its time. Today, it is recognized as a masterpiece. When Bernini unveiled the Ecstasy of St. Teresa in 1652, the memory of Teresa herself was still vivid, not only because of her writings, but because of the extraordinary story of her body. She had died in 1582 in Alba de Tormes. 9 months later, her coffin was opened, and to the astonishment of all, her body was found incorrupt, perfectly preserved, though her clothes had decayed. Word spread quickly. Soon relics were taken, a hand sent to Ávila, a finger kept by her spiritual director, an arm left behind in Alba. Her body itself was moved more than once, claimed by different cities, until Pope Sixtus V ordered it returned to Alba de Tormes, under threat of excommunication if it were moved again. A grand tomb was raised there in 1598, and the faithful flocked to venerate her. This drama of exhumation and relocation only deepened her fame. She was not just remembered for her mystical writings and visions, but for the strange incorruptibility of her body, a sign many took as proof of her sanctity. By 1622, only 40 years after her death, Teresa was canonized by Pope Gregory XV. It was one of the most extraordinary canonization ceremonies in history. On that single day, alongside Teresa, the Church raised to the altars Ignatius of Loyola, Francis Xavier, Philip Neri, and Isidore the Farmer. Together, they represented the great Catholic revival of the 16th century, reformers, mystics, missionaries, and saints who shaped their age. So when Bernini began carving Teresa's vision 3 decades later, she was not a distant medieval figure, but a recent saint, one whose incorrupt body had stirred awe, whose canonization had been celebrated in Rome, and whose voice was still speaking through her books. This immediacy gave Bernini's work its daring intensity. He wasn't sculpting a saint shrouded in legend. He was sculpting a woman whose body had been seen incorrupt, whose remains had been contested, whose sanctity had been recognized by the Church within a single lifetime. His marble Teresa is not a relic of the past, but a proclamation of a living mystery. After the drama of her early exhumations, the tug-of-war over her relics, and the glory of her canonization in 1622, the centuries that followed were quieter. Teresa's tomb in Alba de Tormes became a place of prayer. Pilgrims came, Carmelites guarded the shrine, and her writings on prayer spread slowly but steadily across Europe. For the most part, her body rested undisturbed, hidden away for nearly 300 years. Then came 1914. Civilization itself seemed to be tearing apart in the Great War. Yet, even as nations crumbled, The faithful looked back to their saints for signs of stability. For the first time in centuries, Teresa's tomb was opened again. But her body was not easily reached. Her resting place was secured with an elaborate system of 10 locks. 3 keys held in Alba de Tormes, 3 entrusted to the Duke of Alba, 3 kept in Rome by the Carmelite general, and 1 belonging to the King of Spain. Only by bringing these powers together could the shrine be opened, as if heaven and earth had conspired to guard her remains. That August, with all the keys finally assembled, the tomb was unlocked. Goldsmiths and clergy carefully removed the barriers, and the Carmelites sang as the casket was lifted. What they found astonished them. Teresa's body was still remarkably intact, as incorrupt as it had been the first time it was discovered centuries earlier. The timing was striking. Europe was descending into the horrors of the First World War, yet at that very moment, Teresa's incorrupt body emerged again into the light, a reminder of a different kind of endurance, one rooted in faith and perseverance. Her writings began to circulate more widely in the modern world, reaching beyond convent walls into the hands of lay people hungry for spiritual depth. This renewed interest in her life and thought grew steadily, and in 1970, Pope Paul VI declared Teresa a Doctor of the Church, the first woman ever to receive that title. It was an extraordinary recognition. Her mystical theology, born from her own experiences of suffering and prayer, was placed alongside Augustine, Aquinas, and the greatest teachers in Christian history. She was declared a doctor not only for the depth of her mystical writings, but also for the clarity with which she taught the path of prayer, union with God, and the reform of Christian life. To this day, only 4 women bear the title. But Teresa's story still wasn't finished. In the spring of 2025, her tomb was opened once more. The decision was not made lightly. More than a century had passed since anyone had seen her body, and the Carmelites, with permission from Rome, wanted to both honor her and learn from her. Scientists and theologians stood side by side, waiting to see what remained of a woman who had died over 400 years earlier. What they found stunned them. Instead of the expected dust and brittle fragments, they uncovered something extraordinary. What they found defied ordinary expectations of decomposition. The skeletal structure was intact, but more strikingly, large portions of soft tissue had resisted decay. Skin was still present along the face and hands, retaining clear definition. Patches of brown hair adhered to the scalp. Even ocular structures were partially preserved, with remnants of the eyelids and faint pigmentation of the iris still visible. For a body interred in the late 16th century, the level of preservation was extraordinary, far beyond what normal environmental or burial conditions could explain. Detailed analysis also revealed multiple pathological conditions. The spinal column showed pronounced scoliosis, with curvature severe enough to have impaired posture and mobility. Both knees exhibited advanced osteoarthritic changes, consistent with long-term mechanical stress. Examination of the calcaneae identified prominent spurs, indicating chronic inflammation of the heel bone. The mandible and maxilla revealed extensive tooth loss, with only a few teeth remaining, pointing to significant difficulties with mastication and possibly speech. In contrast, the bones on the right forearm and hand showed remodeling consistent with repetitive fine motor activity, supporting historical accounts of her sustained writing output late into life. Science confirmed what her writings had always suggested. This was a woman who lived in pain, and yet poured herself out in prayer, in reform, and in words that reshaped the church. For 2 weeks in May of 2025, Teresa's body was placed on public display in Alba de Tormes. Nearly 100,000 pilgrims came. This rare event, the third of its kind since her death in 1582, followed a Vatican-authorized year-long study of her relics that began in August of 2024 and confirmed the body's remarkable state of preservation. For the faithful, it was a miracle. For scientists, an enigma. After more than 4 centuries, the body of Teresa of Ávila remains far better preserved than science alone can easily explain. Soil, tomb design, and climate may have played a role, yet the extent of her preservation still astonishes. For believers, it's a sign of sanctity. For skeptics, a mystery worth studying. Either way, Teresa's incorrupt body amplifies the voice of a woman who reformed her order, wrote with piercing clarity about prayer, and became the first female doctor of the Church. What do you think? Miracle or mystery? Share your thoughts below and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this one.